Another round of applause for that amazing choir. We're talking about a revolution. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And can I welcome you to the most diverse postcode in the country. Welcome to N15 Tottenham. And it's hugely important to recognise that we are gathered here on this momentous day in a building that is dedicated and named after the memory of Bernie Grant, MP. Long before ethnic minorities had any representation in Parliament, Bernie was there. I remember being hugely proud of Bernie standing up in the House of Commons and calling for an inquiry into the death of Stephen Lawrence. I remember looking at the screen when Nelson Mandela took those first steps out of prison and into freedom. And I was so proud that Bernie Grant was there with him. Bernie represents the very best of grassroots representation in our country. And he would, if he were alive today, be so proud of this race and faith manifesto. So it's a tribute to Bernie. And of course, the pioneer Diane Abbott that came in with Bernie. Now, in the last Parliament, there were many highs and there were many lows. But if you want a lesson in how to ask an effective parliamentary question, then the man I'm about to introduce did it beautifully. Standing up and looking at Boris Johnson squarely in the eyes, he challenged him with a sort of righteous indignation on the question of what he had said previously about Muslim women. We are hugely proud to have the first turban-wearing Sikh in any parliament in Europe, in our party, Tan Dahisi. Tan. Thank you.
Friends, comrades, colleagues, let us be under no illusion. This is truly a battle for the very heart and soul of our nation. Never before, arguably, has there been such a divisive, opportunistic, and a charlatan of a Prime Minister as we have today, who, through his own personal remarks, not the remarks of his associates or other members of the party, through his own personal remarks from his own tongue, from his own mind, has thrown minority communities and people of faith and race under the bus, literally, on umpteen occasions. There is a long list, a litany of Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson's sexist, racist, and homophobic remarks, which have helped to normalize and increase hate crime towards minority communities. And to this date, there is still no apologies. And even when the likes of me, as David rightly said, when the likes of me have challenged him in Parliament, to date, there has been no independent inquiry on Islamophobia within the Conservative Party, despite him and his Chancellor promising that on national television. And the Tories thought fit that, despite all of that history, to foist him upon all of us as our nation's Prime Minister. But I am incredibly proud of our Labour Party's rich and diverse and proud history when it comes to fighting for minority and faith communities. In 1984, when the Sikh community was under attack, when our most sacred shrine was attacked, it was the likes of Jeremy Corbyn holding up placards and standing up for our human rights. And when black South Africans were facing persecution, it was the likes of Jeremy Corbyn holding up placards when the Tory party thought fit to wear T-shirts emblazoned with "Hang Nelson Mandela, he is a terrorist." It was the Labour movement which stood in solidarity with black South Africans long before it became popular and more fashionable amongst the Tories and those that had nothing to do with standing up for their human rights. And I am very, very pleased by the wonderful Dawn Butler and the incredible Race and Faith Manifesto that her and her team have helped to establish. And within that, there is an independent inquiry, a public review, to establish the extent of the then Thatcher government's involvement within the 1984 storming of the Golden Temple, and also something which Indian communities have been asking for a long time from the Tory government, and they have not budged, and that is an official apology from the Prime Minister of our country for the Jallianwala Bagh massacre in 1919. And as we try to come to terms with our collective colonial history and learn from past mistakes, I think that Dawn and her team have done an incredible job in setting up the Educational Emancipational Trust. So we can be very, very proud of this document. Once again, the Labour Party leading the way. And talking about activism, it is now an incredible and wonderful honour for me to be introducing to you a housing activist who ran an amazing and successful campaign. Can we have a big, big round of applause for the wonderful Litsa Begum?
Thank you so much for that introduction, Tan. So in March 2019, my neighbours and I were informed by Westminster City Council that our homes were to be demolished to make way for luxury apartments. The Duke of Westminster, who owns more land than the Queen and is the richest under 30-year-old in the country, wanted this piece of prime estate for an ambitious redevelopment plan of luxury apartments, affordable housing, and boutiques, and in the process, displacing my community. This took me back to the beginning. I was born to a working-class British Bangladeshi family. My father initially came to England in the late 60s. He travelled to a new land, left his family behind, and endured the unknown so that he could have a better life. In the mid-80s, my father brought his young family to settle in a council estate in Belgravia. This is where I was born, raised, and politicised, even though I didn't know it at the time. I fondly remember playing outside, calling my neighbours uncle or auntie, and when I was young, I thought we were all related, even though Auntie Jamila was from Eritrea, Uncle Onyenyu was from Ghana, and Uncle Ali and Auntie Halima were from Somalia. In my mind, they were my family, and that's exactly how we treated each other. We became a tight-knit community that witnessed life and death together, celebrating milestones and looking out for each other. However, there were always others not so fond of us. I vividly remember my father being chased by a neighbour with a beer bottle, or Mrs. Hall shouting at us to go back home. I often told her, "But I am home." My father also shared many stories with me of being chased by skinheads when he first arrived. He said his trick was to shake his keys in his pockets, and most of the time the skinheads thought it was a knife, so they would run off. Listening to these stories always evoked emotions of anger in me because I wished I had been there to protect my father. I grew up to see Dad become an active member of the community. He was always assisting people or sorting out disputes between people, and witnessing my father's execution of fairness and justice amongst people gave me a strong sense of wanting to fight injustice of any form. But it wasn't all doom and gloom. There were some laugh out loud moments, like the time Mark in year 5 told me I was a foreigner because his dad said so. I went home that day, went up to my dad and said, "Abba, Mark's dad said I was a foreigner." My father smiled and told me to go back to Mark and tell him that I wasn't a foreigner because I had a British passport. And so I did. Before I left primary school, I was told by a girl in class that Mark liked me. So now I wonder how that conversation with Mark's dad must have started. My imagination says Mark told his dad that he liked a Bengali girl, and Mark's dad probably replied, "No son of mine is going out with a foreigner." It's our choice if we let differences in faith and race divide us or unite us. Coming back to the present day, I can see how my earlier experiences shaped me. Becoming an activist wasn't intentional, but it felt like a natural path that I was directed to. I had no choice but to organize with my community against the richest landlord in the country. When I first began this campaign, I never envisioned how successful the campaign would have been. I was told that we little people could never fight a powerful company like the Grosvenor Group. But with the support of Labour's amazing community organising unit, we were able to organise, build power, and take action. I was able to engage with residents on a grassroots level and gain the support of over 200,000 people nationwide through our Change.org petition. My neighbours and I found ourselves on TV and on the front page of the local paper, sharing our human story, and soon, with the pressure of the campaign, residents were given the right to return. This was a big win in an expensive part of the country. But we didn't stop there. The campaign carried on, and with the ever-increasing pressure and unwanted spotlight on the young Duke, I was asked to meet with the CEO of Grosvenor. A few weeks ago, I found myself, an ordinary girl from a council estate, sitting with the CEO of Grosvenor, where I put forward to him terms and conditions which residents had put together, terms and conditions that would have to be met or we would continue our fight. I can only attribute the success of this campaign to two things. The first was the mentoring, coaching, and support I have received from Labour's community organising unit, and the second was through telling our stories and the leadership of our community. Whether that was through social media, telling our stories, and whether that was through social media, newspapers, or TV, our story resonated with the nation because this situation is becoming commonplace. We are seeing property developers across the country building luxury apartments while existing communities are being ripped apart and moved all across the country to places where they have no family or friends and no support network. For once, even the Daily Mail gave us good coverage. Jeremy Corbyn mentioned at conference that there are leaders in every community driving change. Many of them would never dream of calling themselves leaders, but they are. He further mentioned that Labour's philosophy is to trust the people and give them the power to make change in every community and workplace. I am that leader. I am that person that the Labour Communities Organising Unit identified and supported and allowed to make change through participation. This is a party that is supporting communities without being in government. Imagine what would be possible if they were elected. We need a Labour government because it is only a Labour government that recognises the inequalities that exist in society and understands the challenges faced by minority communities. It is only a Labour government that will be dedicated to ensuring that all people from all backgrounds should have the same opportunities. And to conclude, here is where the lesson lies. I'm not just fighting for my home, but for the homes of an entire community. We are people that hold common hopes. We are people from all races and faiths. We may not look the same or come from the same place, but we have so many commonalities, only if we spend time engaging and building relationships. We all want the basic human right of a secure home. We all want more opportunities at work. We all want to create a better future for ourselves and a green industrial revolution for future generations. And I truly believe it is only a Labour government that can achieve this. I'm Lisa Begum, and I won with my uncles and aunties against a billionaire. Now it's time to take number 10. Thank you. I would now like to introduce our next speaker, Mark Mciver, an award-winning and celebrity barber who has established Slider Cut, his hair and beauty studio in London.
Hey guys, my name is Mark Mciver. I am a barber, I am an author, I'm a mentor, and many other things. Yes, I own a shop in Hackney Road in Shoreditch. I've had it for about over a year now. Through this shop, what I've done is I've taken the traditional black barbershop, which is kind of like, for those who might not know, is kind of like a very vital place in the black community, and I've used it to reach out to the community. So I put on schemes like a runner scheme where I hire young boys from between the ages of 13 and 16. We bring them in. They do errands for us, they count money, they sweep up, they get us food. We mentor them, and we help them in the road which they're going down. So when they turn 16, we might help them get into the college they want to, or the internship, or the apprenticeship, or whatever job it is. Also, I run a scheme called Fill It, which is just simply, you can come to the shop, and we will help you just fill in forms. Because when I was younger, I used to have issues with forms. Whenever there was a long form, I'd be like, you know what, that's too long, so I wouldn't do anything. And I realized there's so many people like that. So through the barbershop, I'm like, you can come to the shop. You don't have to be a member of the shop. You don't have to get your hair cut at the shop. And we'll just help you fill in the forms. So through the shop, I've just tried to use the kind of like the influence that we have and help the community. But I'm not really here today to fully talk about everything to do with, my shop. Although I can carry on if you want me to. We're here to talk about Labour, and the reason why I guess I will be voting for Labour. I'm not a politician, so even when they asked me to come, I said, you know what, I don't know exactly every single policy, and I'm not really kind of like fully clued up on everything. And they're like, it's fine, because obviously this is the normal voice, this is the average person. And I want to talk to people to say, especially through the barbershop, I speak to so many young people, and so many people don't want to vote. And I have these questions where I say, why? And they always feel that because their voice won't be heard, they don't think it will make any difference. And I'm always saying, well, do you know what? Every vote matters. And just to explain to them that, yes, one vote by itself means nothing, but you understand, when they say 1 million people voted, it was 1 million individuals that voted. So it's about me coming here to say, do you know what? Well, I've been speaking to them saying, listen, this is what you need to do. Like, if you have issues, especially in a barbershop, if you've been into a barbershop ever, you would have heard the debates, you would have heard the arguments. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody's a politician in a barbershop. Everybody's a football manager. Everybody's an expert on relationships. If you've been in a barbershop, you would know this. And I'm always saying to people, well, if you're going to complain about things, right, does it make sense that when you have when you have the choice to vote to make a change, you say, well, my vote doesn't matter. But in the shop, you're arguing like, you know everything. And recently, just as a plug, but it's to do with this as well, I released a book called Shaping Up Culture. And this book talks to the community which I'm coming from, because there's so much things within the community I'm coming from which I just thought needed to be shaped up. And I thought, where better to start but from a barber who shapes up hair on an everyday basis. And it talks about all of these things where it's kind of like making a change and the things you need to do. There's a topic called, shaping up your community, and the idea of the things that people need to do when it comes to shaping up the community. And ultimately, it starts with you. And the basic thing anybody can do is simply vote. I'm not here to kind of say to everyone, you know what, you vote for this, you vote for that. But if you have opinions in life, if you have beliefs in life, then the thing to do is to vote for the party that lines up with the things that you believe. Very simple. And just to round it up, as I tell people in the barbershop all the time, very simply, actually, no, before I round up, there's one thing I actually want to say, which is actually something very good that Labour is doing, is they want to start a business economic empowerment scheme, where it means that they will actually be giving funding to small businesses. So everything I'm talking about in this book, the lack of resources that, people from, whether it's ethnic minorities, working class backgrounds don't have, Labour are actually saying, you know what, we recognize that, we see that, and we want to help fund those communities. And it's things like that line up with some of my beliefs and the things that I'm really passionate about. And I just want to round up by saying is, if you don't vote, you cannot complain. And now I'd like to introduce someone that you all already know, Diane Abbott.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen and comrades. Good morning. My name is Diane Abbott. I'm the prospective parliamentary candidate for Hackney North and Stoke Newington, just a bus ride away. I'm Shadow Home Secretary and have every hope of becoming Home Secretary in 3 weeks. It feels tremendous to be here in Tottenham for this important policy launch, partly because Tottenham is a heartbeat of our diverse communities, but also because this is Bernie Grant's old stamping ground. And I want to say just one thing about Bernie. Nowadays, Bernie is spoken about as if he is a saint. But you older ones will remember how Bernie was vilified in his time. And it's important to remember that just because you are vilified in the here and now doesn't mean to say you're not right. So some things are better since myself, Keith Vaz, Paul Button and Bernie Grant first entered Parliament in 1987. It's important to remember that 4 black MPs being elected the first time in 1987 didn't happen by chance. It happened because people struggled and campaigned for it. And it was that struggle and campaign which produced the advances we have seen. For instance, we have many more black and minority MPs in Parliament on both sides. And in the Labour Party, we have a fantastic lineup of new candidates that we're promoting, including the prospective parliamentary candidate for Streatham. But let's have applause for our new candidates. So, I mean, that is better. When I first became an MP in 1987, the security guards used to stop me and Bernie and Paul all the time because they just did not believe we were members of Parliament because they'd never seen members of Parliament that looked like us before. The other thing that is better, undoubtedly better over 30 years, that there are many more black and minority ethnic people in all of our professions, be it the law, be it business, be it medicine, be it media. That's a consequence of people working hard and people campaigning for it, and it's a definite improvement. It's also the case, I have to tell you, that Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet has more black and minority ethnic people in it than any other Labour shadow cabinet. And as I suggested earlier, in 2 or 3 weeks' time, Jeremy will be in number 10, and there will be many more black and minority ethnic ministers than ever before. So some things have got better, but some things have not advanced as we would like. One of the things I campaigned on when I was a new MP is the issue of education and what is happening to black and minority ethnic children in our education system. And it is still the case, sadly, as it was 30 years ago, that black and minority ethnic children are more likely to be excluded and they're more likely to underperform. So one of the things in this new manifesto about looking at how we recruit more black and minority ethnic teachers is a vital policy proposal. In cities like London, the teaching workforce needs to look like the children they are teaching. Another thing which has not progressed as we would all have liked is the issue of the immigration system and how it treats black and minority ethnic migrants and residents. And that was exemplified by the Windrush scandal. The Windrush generation were a generation that came here to rebuild this country after the war. They helped rebuild many aspects of our public services, of our manufacturing, and perhaps above all, our National Health Service. My mother came here on a boat in the 1950s, and the way the Windrush scandal vilified and marginalized and hurt her generation is something that I personally will never forgive. But if you elect a Labour government on the 12th, we will end the hostile environment and we will ensure justice for the Windrush generation. The other issue where there hasn't necessarily been the progress that we might have liked has been the relationship between communities and the police. Now, let me just say one word about Stop and Search. We hear a lot about Stop and Search, and I'm telling you, as Shadow Home Secretary, evidence-based Stop and Search is an important tool for our police force. But non-evidence-based stop and search, random stop and search, can prove fatal to relationships between communities and the police. So I'm here to say stop and search has a role, but it's not the answer to youth crime in itself. We need to, as a Labour government, rebuild our youth service. We need to look at what's happening in our schools with children being excluded. And we need to have a police force and more police officers, more community police officers that can build relationships with our community. Stop and search on its own is not the easy answer. So here we are, launching this amazing race and faith manifesto. I might point out the Tories and Lib Dems are doing nothing like this. And it's just one reason why on December the 12th, you, your friends, your families, the man and woman you meet on the street need to go out, vote Labour and secure a victory for Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party.
If you are in social housing, if you are LGBT+, if you are straight, if you are a traveller, if you struggle to pay the rent, if you are a hijab, turban, cross, if you are black, white, Asian, if you are disabled, if you are old, if you are young, if you don't have a trust fund, if you didn't go to Oxbridge, if you are working class, if you are under 18, if you are aspirational, if you work, if you are a carer, if you feel you won't live beyond 25, if you have ever ticked the other box, you have a future, and you are worthy. Worthy of equality, worthy of dignity, and worthy of respect. And the Labour government will value you. Just be your authentic self.
Okay.
170, yes. Okay. Well, I don't know how to deal with that. Look, thank you very much indeed for inviting me to be here. I'm delighted to help launch the Labour's Race and Faith Manifesto. And that's going to show how the Labour Party will make our country a safer and more hospitable environment for all our ethnic minority and faith communities. That's bottom line, that's important. I think the morning could not go by without my just making a comment about the Chief Rabbi. I am bitterly disappointed what he said. I don't accept a lot of what he said. And insofar as the Labour Party is at fault, it's that we should have acted a bit quicker. That's the only thing. I'm sorry to be critical of you guys, but if we'd acted a bit quicker, what we're doing now is the right thing. And I think for today of all days, for the Chief Rabbi to be attacking the Labour Party in this particular way and attacking our leader is unjustified and unfair, and I am bitterly, bitterly disappointed that he's done that. Among our minority and faith communities are, of course, migrants and refugees, who are often mistreated and left behind by society if they manage to make it to this country at all. And I've been campaigning for the resettlement of child refugees here in Britain for the last few years. I'm shocked and disappointed that so few unaccompanied child refugees have been allowed into the UK. We could have done a lot better, and I'm disappointed that they're still there, stuck in the jungle, what's left of the jungle in Calais, living in difficult conditions on the Greek islands and elsewhere in refugee camps. I firmly believe that if we put it to the British people, they are supportive of our taking more child refugees into this country. Public opinion is on our side. We've got to explain the arguments, and public opinion will be with us. And that's what I hope the next Labour government will demonstrate in action when, well, in a few weeks' time, 3 weeks' time. Refugees have been close to my heart as an issue, not simply because I came as a child refugee to this country way back as a year at the age of 6, when I came to the UK on a Kindertransport fleeing from Nazi-occupied Czechoslovakia. Not for that reason. The argument for child refugees should not depend upon the personal experience of the individual putting the argument. Nevertheless, I put it. I think it's terrifying how we see the rise of the far right today. There have been horrific attacks. We've seen them on Jews in Pittsburgh and in Muslims in Christchurch. These are disgusting attacks, and they're happening in many, many countries. That's why I'm pleased that a future Labour government will ensure that all children are taught about racism, antisemitism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, black history and the Holocaust as a fundamental part of their teaching. Can I just tell you a little story? About a year ago, I was invited to speak about child refugees to a maintained school in Tower Hamlets. It was all boys, and I think they were pretty well all Muslim boys. Anyway, I said my piece, and then the first question from a young Muslim boy, how do I explain to people who don't believe the Holocaust ever happened? I thought that was a terrific question from a school and from a Muslim boy like that. Shows an understanding that discrimination, prejudice, hatred of one minority can also be reflected in discrimination, hatred of other minorities. So we've got to tackle them all across the piece. So I thought that moment in that school was important, and that is the sort of thing that we want every school to do on the basis of the manifesto we're launching today. I'm also glad that Labour will work with our partners across Europe to challenge the rise of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism wherever it happens. We've seen the dog whistle politics of the Hungarian government, who've stated quite openly they're not interested in refugees, they're only interested in white Christians, whatever that means. That's shocking, and that is a sign of some of the things that are happening in Europe, where the far-right parties are exploiting the issue of minorities, particularly the issue of refugees, to further their own shabby political ends. We've got to resist that wherever we see it, and we've got to associate with our friends in other countries in helping them to resist it. So I'm absolutely delighted to be here today to be campaigning for this manifesto, and I'm pleased that we're still in the middle election campaign. I've got a lot more canvassing to do. I've taken the morning off canvassing to be here. Anyway, thank you for this, and now I look forward to our hearing from our next speaker, Jeremy.
Thanks for what you said and what you said on the radio this morning. What an amazing comrade. Thank you. Thank you, Alf, for what you said this morning and for the work you've done all your life to stand up against racism in any form within our society. I first met you in 1983 when I became an MP, and you were brilliant as an anti-racist spokesperson from the Labour front bench, and you've been so ever since. Alf, thank you very much for everything that you've done. Because your life was formed by the rise of far-right extremism, the rise of fascism, the rise of anti-Semitism in Germany, and that's how you made your home in this country, and you've made such an amazing contribution to the lives of all of us. Alf is an example to so many. It's really fantastic for me to be here in the Bernie Grant Centre because I knew Bernie very, very well. He was a very close friend of mine, and his passing was obviously of enormous sadness. And many of us were very determined that we should get a centre named in his honour, and this is what the Bernie Grant Centre is, and I thank all those that have put so much work into it. Bernie was a representative of Tottenham, but was also a representative of the wider community in Britain, the black community in Britain, but also a representative of the interests of many of the poorest countries around the world and their relationship with Britain. And his understanding of colonial history in the past was something that he taught an awful lot of people about before his untimely death. And it's appropriate that the Bernie Grant Centre should be here in Tottenham, of course, but this postcode, N15, where we are now, is the most diverse postcode anywhere in Britain. There are at least 150 different languages spoken in this postcode alone. And I think it's so appropriate that we should be able to launch our Race and Faith Manifesto here today, and I'm very proud to do that. This document is one that's been produced by us, by the Labour Party. Sadly, the whole of the Tory Party manifesto doesn't mention any of the issues that are included in this, not one mention whatsoever. And I thank all the people that contributed to our Race and Faith manifesto. 1,700 people sent carefully thought out good views to be a part of our manifesto, and I'm grateful to them for all of that. I also thank the choir for singing this morning, to David Lammy, who's gone off to Wales to do some campaigning, for the work that he does as the MP here, Tandis I, Lisa Begum, and many, many others. But in particular, Dawn Butler, Diane Abbott, and Stephen Timms for the work that they do to be inclusive of race and faith issues in the party, and for Chi Onwurah for the work that she does, particularly in the economy and ensuring that our economic strategies are fair, just and good for all communities in this country. Also, I'd like to say a big thank you to our international policy advisor, Jennifer Larby, for being the pen holder in writing this document. Labour is a party of equality and human rights. The race legislation that's gone through the British Parliament came with the Labour government of 1964 in response to the Bristol bus boycott, which so moved Harold Wilson, and Paul Stephenson persuaded Harold that there had to be legislation on the statute book. And there was. Initially, it wasn't anything like strong enough, but it has grown ever since then. It was Labour also that passed the Human Rights Act, that set up the Equality and Human Rights Commission. It's Labour that has to its very core the issues of justice and human rights within our society. And I want to lead a government where it's absolutely central to everything that we do, and that we will do indeed. But I just say, in order to be able to win that election in 2 weeks' time, people do need to be registered to vote. So you have until 23:59 tonight to register to vote. 23:59, 1 minute before midnight. And we will not be promoting the idea in government of voter ID, which has actually deterred a lot of people in the BAME community from being able to vote in elections. And so, thanks Stormzy and all the others that have promoted voter registration. It's very interesting that the Tory party manifesto doesn't mention it at all. And because this election hinges on many things, but it is the issues of discrimination against BAME communities in economy and business. It is about the pay gap, the way in which there is a significant pay gap between minority ethnic communities working in businesses and the rest of the community. It is about discrimination in recruitment, it is about monitoring, and it is about what I think has become very important, anonymous job applications, so that those that are doing the initial selections for jobs as employers cannot discriminate on the basis of perceptions surrounding somebody's name. And that we are determined to do. And we will set up a race equality unit in the Treasury as well, so that all the economic policies that we're putting forward will be monitored against the effect on different communities to ensure that we are supporting those communities that most need the help and investment that is so important for them to grow. And I recognise that there are many small businesses set up by different communities. Communities for India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, the Caribbean, Far East, so many places that have set up small businesses in Britain. All of them have determination. All of them want to employ people. All of them want to grow. Too often they have enormous difficulties in accessing a loan to set the business up, or to get any capital borrowing for it to grow. And so our whole strategy on regional employment strategies, National Investment Bank and regional transformation funds will be about supporting those businesses that are such a very important economic motor to our society. This community alone here in Tottenham, when I first came to live here in the early 1970s, was dominated by big manufacturing, Gestetner factory down the road and many other factories all along the River Lee. All of those have now gone and been replaced by a whole plethora of small and often very exciting businesses. Labour is on the side of those communities that want to achieve so much by developing those small businesses. But we also have to recognise there is a crisis about representation of BAME communities in the higher echelons of public life and public services. There are only 25 black female professors in all of the British universities. Nobody can tell me that's fair representation of a community that works so hard to get the education they need and desire through degrees and other kinds of training. And so I think we have to look into that and look into the shortage of black head teachers in our schools as well. And so within 1 month of taking office, we will be reviewing the whole process of appointments to make sure that it is fair in the future and there is proper representation of all BAME communities in the higher echelons of our education service, as well as in all the other important parts of our education service. I think the teaching and understanding of history is probably the most important thing many of our children learn in school. The way in which they understand the history of our own country, the whole story of Britain, how it came to be what it is today. But they also need to understand the story of the rest of the world and the interaction between Europe, Africa, Latin America, Asia. They need to have that understanding of history. Dawn and I have discussed this quite a lot. And what we decided was that we would promote, and she's done great work on this, and I'll speak about it later, the Emancipation Education Trust, which will be a vehicle for ensuring that the history of the slave trade, the history of the Middle Passage, the history of the unbelievable levels of brutality and death of millions of black people who were forced into slavery in the United States and the Caribbean. That story needs to be told not just during Black History Month, but be central and part and parcel of the history all of our children learn in all of our schools all the year round. And I'm determined that we shall achieve that. And we'll be working with all communities as to how the Emancipation Education Trust develops, the support it gives and the teaching materials that it makes available. Sometimes when people are challenged, they say, are you tolerant of somebody else? Are you tolerant of somebody who has a different faith to you or a different appearance to you? I don't like that word, tolerant. I don't tolerate people. I respect people. So let's do it on the basis of respect and inclusion in our society. Respect and inclusion for people of all faiths and of none, and of all backgrounds and none, and recognise that diversity is something that we can be actually very, very proud of. But let's also be clear, abuse and racism in any form is not acceptable in any way in our society. An attack on a mosque, an attack on a synagogue, an attack on a temple, abuse of a Jewish woman on a train, abuse of a Muslim woman in the street, abuse of a black youngster happily walking home from school is not acceptable in any way. An attack on a synagogue, a mosque, a temple or a church is actually an attack on all of us because it's our lives, our community that is damaged as a result of that. And therefore, under our government, we will ensure there is full protection for all synagogues, mosques, temples and churches as they require it and as they ask for it. We will also make sure that any offence done against places of worship becomes an aggravated crime under Labour, and it will be a requirement on the police to deal with it expeditiously and effectively and to take the relevant persons to court as a result of it. I have to say, just want to make this very clear, anti-Semitism in any form is vile and wrong. It is an evil within our society. It's an evil that grew in Europe in the 1920s and onwards and ultimately led to the Holocaust. There is no place whatsoever for anti-Semitism in any shape or form or in any place whatsoever in modern Britain, and under a Labour government it will not be tolerated in any form whatsoever. I want to make that clear. And where the cases have been reported to us in the Labour Party, we have a rapid and effective system of dealing with them. And that process is constantly under review to make sure it is rapid and it is effective. And also that there is an education programme within our party so that people can understand what happened when the Holocaust finally came about, what was the lead up to it, what were the levels of racism that led to that in the first place. How was it the far right were able to rise? So, under us, we will protect places of worship. We will protect cemeteries that are under any form of abuse or attack whatsoever. And I want to work with people of all faiths and none. I've been a Member of Parliament in an inner city constituency since 1983. There are people of all faiths and none. There are people from every part of the world living in the community that I'm very proud to represent. And it's always been my pride and my pleasure to work with all of those people and all of those communities to understand their story, to understand their lives, to understand what they're looking for in life. And so, in government, our door will be open to all faith leaders to come and talk to us and make representations on behalf of their communities. So, to those from the Muslim Council of Britain, Muslim Association of Britain will be very welcome. The chief rabbi and all other representatives of the Jewish community will be very welcome. The Archbishop of Canterbury and everybody else from different aspects of the Christian community, the Hindu community, and so many other communities will all be very, very welcome to come around the table, discuss with us their issues, their concerns, but above all, how we create a society that is respectful of all faiths and gives that security and that place for all communities. Because a society that's under stress and people feeling under threat is not a happy or comfortable society. We have to change the way things are done, and I'm absolutely determined to make sure that's the case. What we're faced with at the moment in this country and across Europe and in the United States is a rise of the intolerant far right, the far right that can only ever seek to give out a message of division and hatred. They walk in the footsteps of the Nazis of the 1920s with their hatred, blaming economic problems on refugees, on migrants, blaming it on people that have suffered the most and often lead the poorest lives in our society. And they seek to divide, and then when they're finished with one scapegoat, be it refugees, they move on to migrant workers, they move on to European workers, they move on to somebody else. And they keep doing it. When you created all that hate and all that division and all that nastiness in society, have you built a school? Have you built a hospital? Have you trained a doctor? No, you've achieved absolutely nothing but empowerment of those that want to divide people. And we will not tolerate that at all. So we will do everything to challenge the rise of the far right in our society, including an examination of the rise of far right organisations, the rise of Islamophobia and the attacks on mosques and temples. And I just say this to those who sat around tables in government and deliberately created the hostile environment which brought about the scandal and the injustice of the Windrush generation. I simply say to this, shame on you. Those people that came to this country in the 1940s, 50s and 60s, as well as many who came in many decades and centuries before, have made this country what it is. They've given us the living standard we've got. They've given us the health service, the education service, and the science that we've got. And the hurt of those people that were told after a lifetime of work here, they suddenly didn't belong and they had to go back. They deserve, obviously, a total apology. They deserve also the compensation. But they also deserve to know that in future, this country will never treat people like that, will never turn its back on those that have given us so much in their lives. I'm with the Windrush generation and all that they've done for all of us. And so, as we move into the last 2 weeks of the election campaign, our manifesto has been published. Our manifesto is out there for all to see. It's a manifesto that's been written by the energy, enthusiasm and knowledge of thousands of people all over the country. Members of the Labour Party, active people in trade unions, universities, colleges, and people who are also the experts, the care workers, the doctors, the teachers, those that clean our streets, those that work in recycling, those that work in factories. They've all contributed to this manifesto. And running through this manifesto is a golden thread. The golden thread of a society that cares for all. The golden thread of a society that respects all. The golden thread of a society that is proud to work together to end poverty and injustice and inequality brought about by austerity, a deliberate political act in 2010, and to give real hope to all communities and build a society that's fit for the next generation to grow up in. I'm very proud of the work that we've done in the party, very proud of the manifesto we've put forward, and very proud to lead a party of diversity, a party of members from all communities and all faiths and no faiths in this country. And I'm very proud to speak on the world stage on behalf of a country that is proud of its diversity, because that is what makes us strong. That is what helps our children to grow up with a better understanding of what they can achieve and how we can change this world for the better. Don't be frightened of the environmental crisis. Take it as an opportunity. But recognise also that it's the poorest people in the poorest countries that suffer the most because of the environmental crisis. And our international policies will reflect our priorities, always, to support the poorest and most vulnerable, those that suffer the most, because this world cannot go on with the degrees of inequality it's got, any more than this country can go on ignoring the levels of inequality that are there. This manifesto is just such a huge step forward and can radically change the lives of millions of people in this country and get us a government that will try and do the same by working with others, like-minded people all around this world. I'm delighted to be here at the Bernie Grant Centre, very proud of the manifesto we put forward, and I thank you all for coming today to hear what our plans are. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Actually, I'm just the warm-up act for Dawn Butler. Because Dawn Butler is going to come on now, who is our Shadow Minister for Women and Equalities and has done a fantastic job in our Shadow Cabinet. And our Shadow Cabinet, I'm proud to say, is diverse, is representative of society as a whole, and Dawn plays an incredible part in that. Dawn, over to you.
Thank you, Jeremy. And thank you all so much. And thank you to the Bernie Grant Centre for hosting us today. Thank you to Sharon for coming to get me this morning. And thank you all. The choir, amazing. And weren't they great? And their first song, Tracy Chapman, talking about a revolution. And finally, the tables are starting to turn. We're talking about a revolution. There is more that unites us than divides us. Some people in our country are trying to divide us with their lies, fake news, and rhetoric. It suits them to do this. By sowing division, they think they can win this election. It is to some an easy strategy. It is the hate strategy. Donald Trump used it, and that got him in the White House. But it's a dangerous strategy because the scars left in our community will take a long time to heal if we allow it to happen. So we must stop it. And the only way to stop this is by uniting. Those very few at the very top, they get their kicks by looking down at us fighting for the minimum. Emily Sunday has a line in her song entitled You Are Not Alone. And it says this: as your heart adjusted to the dark. That's what the Tories want. They are trying to fool us. They're trying to fool us to think there is no other way. Well, they are wrong. There is another way. Because there is no conceivable reason why wealth cannot be shared. This is why this faith and race manifesto is so important. When you marry this with the other manifesto, showing solidarity is not always easy. To put yourself out there, to put yourself on the line. But by each one of us doing this, we will ensure that our rights are not rolled back. As Bob Marley sang, we need to get up, stand up for our rights. We need to get up, stand up, don't give up the fight. There is a video that's gone viral. There's a man, and he's being harassed. It's a Jewish man, and he's being harassed, including his 3 children, with anti-Semitic abuse. It's disgusting. It's unsettling. And it's unsettling to watch. You just want to jump through the screen and just say, stop it. And some people on the train are just looking on. Some, as they do, record it on their phones. And after one man tried to intervene, it is a woman in a hijab who steps in. She said later, being a mother of two, I know what it's like to be in that situation. And I would want someone to help me. And I tweeted that not all heroes wear capes. And someone responded, some wear hijabs. So Boris Johnson, you are wrong. They don't look like letterboxes or bank robbers, but some look and are heroes. And in this one incident, you can see how far we have come and yet how far we still have to go. We have to combat racism and discrimination wherever it raises its ugly head. There is no hierarchies of racism and oppression. All forms of racism are wrong. I want you to think about that incident again for a moment. A woman in a hijab. Islamic incidents rose by 375% in the week after Boris Johnson compared veiled Muslim women to letterboxes. 375%. A woman in a hijab stepped forward with humanity and solidarity. For all our differences, whether they be ethnic, religious, or racial, we are all more alike than we are unalike. And in this great, diverse country of ours, we have to stand up to fairness, decency, equality, and at the end of the day, each other. Only the Labour Party is seeking to do this. Only the Labour Party has produced a manifesto powered by the people, for the people. Only the Labour Party is on your side. We have a lot to be proud of in this country when it comes to matters of racial and religious diversity. Whether it's Stormzy headlining at Glastonbury, Steve McQueen's exhibition at the Tate, or Jaya Ben Desai, who fought for the rights of minority ethnic women, we are all central to the part of British culture. Can you imagine a world without diversity? Without Black, Asian, minority ethnic inventors? Many things we take for granted simply wouldn't exist. We wouldn't have traffic lights. Can you imagine the chaos without the traffic lights? We wouldn't have blood blanks, no light bulbs, no iron boards. Well, I haven't actually got an iron board, so that doesn't really apply to me. But no reggae music, no Irish folk songs that leaves you in tears, no chicken tikka masala or jerk chicken, no Black, Asian, minority ethnic businesses. And as Martin Luther King said, I cannot be where I ought to be until you are where you ought to be. That is the interrelated structure of reality. Diversity is so tightly interwoven into our national story that if you tried to unpick it, the whole thing would unravel. And being the global majority, the world would unravel. That is why Labour is determined to build and empower communities. Labour's pro-business agenda is good for everyone. Labour will ensure economic empowerment for all. We want small, medium enterprises to succeed as much as big businesses. We will support our Black, Asian, minority ethnic wealth creators through the National Investment Bank with better access to finances. For far too long, and especially over the last 9 years, we have seen businesses struggle and fail, not because of the lack of ambition or hard work, but because of the lack of accessible finance. None of my small businesses could get a wad of money from the Prime Minister because they taught private technology lessons, or get a shipping contract without having any ships. If we can bail out the banks, why can't we help small businesses and start-ups? It makes no sense. Only the Labour Party is going to do that. Our small, medium enterprises are the backbone of our economy, providing 60% of employment and keeping our high streets alive. A Labour government will give SMEs a lifeline. Back in the 80s, Conservative grandee Norman Tebbit evoked a cricket test to the question for loyalties of non-white Britons. This year, we won the Cricket World Cup with a squad including a West Indian, a Pakistani, a South African, a New Zealand, and an Irishman. Who needs a test that excludes when we can have an inclusive team that excels? Black, Asian, minority, ethnic have been central to building our country, whether it's been sacrificing lives in both world wars or saving lives in the NHS. We have been front and center in the key moments of this nation's history. One of the key challenges outlined in this manifesto is to make sure that British history, as Jeremy said, is taught in its entirety, so that those contributions are recognized and valued. Things that we are proud of did not happen on their own. We are not the product of our innate genius as a country. We fought for them. And if we truly value our diversity, then we have to keep on fighting. And that fight is real, and that fight is now. Labour has to win on the 12th of December. The risks are not winning, it's just too great. Labour will commission an independent review into the rise of the far right and stop its growth in our country. Its nasty, destructive growth in our country. And one of the most powerful ways of tackling racism is through education. Labour will launch with all its might and power the Emancipation Educational Trust to educate around migration, colonialism, and address the legacy of slavery, and teach how it interrupted a rich and powerful Black history. It will provide a hub and school programs to ensure a deeper understanding of Black history, because you know what? Black history is British history. The Trust will consult with banks and businesses with the historic links to the slave trade to establish bursaries for education and training for African, Caribbean, Asian, and minority ethnic people. The Trust will address the historic injustices of the slave trade. It will aim to provide school programs and visits for young people to ensure that it's never forgotten. It will highlight positive stories often hidden from history, including the immense strength and sacrifice and resilience of those enslaved, and acknowledge the special wealth and beauty of Africa and the Caribbean. We will launch a wide-ranging review into the underrepresentation of BAME teachers in schools within our first month of government. Labour, we are serious about tackling underachievement. And if we are, we've got to tackle the unnecessary exclusions and progress. Then we need to diversify. We will draw experiences from some amazing teachers and head teachers, such as Deo Olukushi OBE. And I need to elevate my Brent teachers, such as Everton Sharp, Karen Giles, Sophie Allen, and voted the world's best teacher, Andre Safiraku. There is a lot, people, to fight for. The Gypsy, Roma, and traveller communities who sometimes feel like they're the group that nobody wants to recognise and support. They are often judged by bad press rather than the parents trying to get their children into good schools. Well, Labour is on your side. We will develop a comprehensive Gypsy, Roma, and traveller equality strategy to tackle persistent inequalities, particularly within housing, education, and the criminal justice system. Far too often, Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities find themselves disproportionately stopped, searched, unemployed, underemployed, underrepresented, excluded, imprisoned, poor, polluted, and generally under-resourced. Because of institutional racism, there are still too many Black men and women in prison and not enough in the boardrooms. There are still too many Bangladeshi and Pakistanis in poor housing and not enough in the House of Commons. Well, Labour is on your side. And if we are to be hopeful, about our future, we must be honest about our past, including colonialism and slavery and their consequences. And it is offensive when people say, get over it. Would you say that for any other injustice or oppression in our history? And how can you get over something when you are still under the structural oppressions that causes racism and prejudice? The Windrush scandal, in which British citizens who had lived here almost all of their lives, paid taxes, raised families, volunteered, built communities, were threatened with deportation. And some cases were actually deported. And some died. And their families are still seeking justice. Hubert Howard, we should know his name. He came to London just aged 3 years old and lived here for 59 years. The hostile environment meant he lost his job because he was unable to prove that he was in the UK legally. A British citizen, he was unable to get a passport to visit his mother in Jamaica on her deathbed. And Hubert, without receiving compensation or an apology, died in debt, just 3 weeks after he was finally granted British citizenship. This was not a glitch in the system. It was the Tory state-sanctioned system working as the Conservative government intended it to. We can be shocked by Hubert's story. We can be angry by Hubert's story. But are we prepared to do something about it? Because that system is still in place today. So if we want to change it, we have to change this wretched government, and we need to vote Labour on the 12th of December. More than anything, we must fight against those who seek to discriminate against some on the basis of their difference. Against those who will scapegoat a majority, the Tories sent go-home vans in my constituency and others to intimidate our communities. Tories support a president abroad who separates children from their families and puts them in cages while threatening travellers, gypsies and Roma, and bullying migrants and LGBT+ communities. The Tories conducted a race disparity audit and found that as a government, they were institutionally racist. And you know what they did? Absolutely nothing about it. Labour will be different. In government, we will be different. We will have a race unit, and we will ensure that no spending commitments made will have an adverse impact on Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities. In this election, you have a clear choice between the Conservatives, a party that seeks to divide us on the basis of difference, or Labour, which seeks to celebrate our differences and unite us on the basis of needs. The Labour Party has a strong and proud history of not just fighting against bigotry, racism and prejudice, but fighting for equality, diversity and respect. We have come a long way. And as another song goes, I don't believe God has taken us this far to leave us. This election is a turning point in our country. We may have some differences in policies, and Labour has made some mistakes, but they are not insurmountable. We can unite, and we can win this. We can fight this together. Let's move forward together. Let's vote for a Labour government on the 12th of December. Let's give Labour a chance to change the direction of our country for the better. This launch today is vital to show that the country, that we are listening. And I want to thank, as Jeremy has thanked, Stephen Timms, Diane Abbott, Chion Wara, who hosted listening, faith and race consultations. And I want to thank my team, Carolyn Harris, Nash Shah and Baroness Anita Gale. We are truly the many and not the few. It ain't easy, but nothing worth fighting for ever is. And as the choir will sing, we have to stay strong, because the higher they build their barriers, it's my theme songs, I get emotional, the taller we become. The farther they take our rights away, the faster we must run. They can deny us. They can choose to turn their face away. It doesn't matter, because there's something inside so strong. I know that we can make it, though they're doing us wrong, so wrong. They thought that our pride was gone. Oh no, there's something inside so strong.
Your barrier, the taller I become, the further you take my rights away, the faster I will run. You can deny me, you can decide to turn your face away. No matter, 'cause there's something inside so strong. I know that I can make it, but you're doing me wrong, so wrong. You thought that my pride was gone. Oh no, something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong. The louder I will sing. You hide behind walls of Jericho. Your walls will come tumbling. Deny my place in time. You squander wealth that's mine. My light will shine so brightly it will blind you. 'Cause there is something inside so strong. I know that I can make it, but you're doing me wrong, so wrong. You thought that my pride was gone. Oh no, something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong.
Brothers and sisters, when they insist we're just not good enough,
Just not good enough.
oh, when we know better, just look them in the eye and say, we gotta do it anyway, yeah.
We're gonna do it anyway.
Say,
We're gonna do it anyway.
we gotta do it anyway. There's something inside,
Something inside so strong.
so strong.
I know that I can make
You
it,
got me so right. something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong.
Absolutely awesome. Can we have another big, big round of applause for the choir? We're now going to take some questions from the press, and as they are about to do their job, I would like to remind everybody that we need to be respectful, welcoming and comradely, as Jeremy always is, and we need to listen to the questions and their responses. I would like to take it in threes, please. So I've got, in terms of my list, I've got, first of all, from Sky, Beth Rigby, and from Channel 4, Paul McNamara, and also from Channel 5 News, Andy Bell.
This is a question addressed to Mr. Corbyn. On the day your Race and Faith manifesto is launched, the chief rabbi has made an unprecedented intervention into this election. He says anti-Semitism is a new poison sanctioned from the very top of the Labour Party. He says Labour can no longer claim to be the party of equality and anti-racism. He says this election battle is that for the soul of our nation. If, as the chief rabbi says, the overwhelming majority of Jews are gripped with anxiety, his words, about you being Prime Minister, how can the wider public, in good conscience, vote Labour? Thank you.
Paul McNamara from Channel 4 News.
Hello there, again to Mr. Corbyn. There have been accusations of anti-Semitism within the party throughout your leadership. You've just said that anti-Semitism is vile and wrong, and yet, during your time as leader, despite all the accusations, you've apparently failed to convince the chief rabbi that you take anti-Semitism seriously. Why do you think that is? Is he wrong?
Thank you very much, Paul. And now I'd like, from Channel 5 News, Andy Bell.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Andy Bell, 5 News. Mr. Corbyn, on the same theme, do you feel that you personally have failed in failing to address this issue? Can you point to moments when you realise you didn't do enough to stamp out this problem? Because quite clearly it has become a problem and has grown to the extent that it has now dominated today, so close to a general election.
Thank you for your questions. I made it very clear in my speech, and I make it very clear again now. There is no place whatsoever for anti-Semitism in our society, our country, or in my party, and there never will be so long as I'm leader of the party. And since I became leader of the party has adopted processes that didn't exist before, that has had a disciplinary process that didn't exist before, and where people have committed anti-Semitic acts, they're brought to book and, if necessary, expelled from the party or suspended or asked to be educated better about it. I've also introduced an education system within the party. I want to live in a country where people respect each other's faith. I want to live in a country where people feel secure to be Jewish, to be Muslim, to be Hindu, to be Christian. And I want to lead a government that has an open door to all of the faith leaders. So I invite the Chief Rabbi, I invite the Archbishop of Canterbury, I invite all the other faith leaders to come, talk to us about what their concerns are, but be absolutely clear of this assurance from me. No community will be at risk because of their identity, their faith, their ethnicity, or their language. I am proud to represent a diverse community in Parliament. I've spent my life fighting racism in any form, right outside here on Tottenham High Road in the 1970s. And so there is no place for it, and I ask those that think things have not been done correctly to tell me about it, talk to me about it, but above all, engage. I'm very happy to engage with anybody. My whole life has been engagement with people. Sometimes you agree with them, sometimes you don't, but you only learn by that process of engagement. So I say to all communities, let's make our country safe for all of us, and that is what our manifesto is all about, and that's why I'm so proud of our Race and Faith manifesto today.
Thank you very much. And carrying on with the theme of taking 3 questions at a time, there'll be a roving mic, but I would like also now to invite from BBC Asia Network, Shabnam Mahmood, and from the Jewish News, Matilda Frott, and from the Islam channel, Shah Nawaz. So can we have Shabnam Mahmood from the BBC Asia Network? There'll be a mic coming to you.
To Mr. Corbyn, what's in the manifesto on how you plan to combat Islamophobia in Britain today?
Thank you very much. And Matilda Frott from Jewish News. Okay, we go on to the next one. Shah Nawaz from the Islam channel.
Is Jewish News at the back?
Oh, Jewish News.
Are you from Jewish News?
No. So can we have Shah Nawaz from the Islam channel? Anywhere here?
It's been a really, really interesting day today, but I'd like to ask the question for Islam Channel TV viewers. What assurances can you give the Muslim community that issues of Islamophobia will be dealt with and that they will be safe in their communities?
Thank you. Just down the road, about 15 minutes on the bus from here, you get to Finsbury Park. And in 2017, a far-right racist drove a vehicle into a crowd of people going home from prayers during Ramadan and killed Makram Ali on the road outside where I live. He was murdered because he is a Muslim. He was murdered because this far-right extremist thought he could get away with it. The Imam was on the scene very quickly and protected the person who perpetrated this vile crime that murdered Makram Ali, because he didn't want the whole community to explode with anger. He adopted a position of the most amazing levels of leadership. And so, when an attack happens to anybody, it is an attack on all of us. Islamophobia is on the rise. Islamophobia does mean people get injured, people get hurt, people get abused, and mosques get daubed and damaged as a result of it. We will not tolerate that any more than we would tolerate an attack on a synagogue or any other place of worship. And I invite all parties to adopt the processes that we've adopted, where we do not tolerate any form of Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, or anything else within our party. And I invite the Conservative Party to address the issues of Islamophobia that appear to be a problem within their party. Because we have to have a political system that is safe for all. And our wonderful chair here, Tan, is somebody that has spoken out so eloquently about this, about the contribution of his community, the Sikh community, to this country, and the way in which an abuse on him or an abuse on anybody else is actually an abuse on all of us. And so Islamophobia is and always will be challenged in any form that it raises itself, and that is absolutely inclusive within our manifesto. And I thank the Islam Channel and BBC Asian Channel for bringing up those questions.
Thank you very much. And now I'd like to invite from Gaudem, Leah Cohen, and also from the Middle East Eye, Arib Ullah. So have we got Leah here from Gaudem?
I'm actually Misha. I am the opinions editor at Gaudem. I wanted to ask, obviously, well, our magazine represents women and non-binary people of colour, and obviously we see up into Parliament like women of colour and non-binary people of colour experiencing unique challenges. And so I was wondering, what can Labour do to kind of make sure that those barriers are taken away for our demographic?
Thank you very much. And Aribullah? Right at the back there.
Thank you very much. This is addressed to Mr. Corbyn. In the manifesto, you mentioned that you will be considering a review of the controversial prevent strategy. And I wanted to ask is, will Labour commit to a broader review of Home Office counter-terrorism policies and the organisations it supports, given concerns raised by the Muslim community about the Building Stronger Britain Together programme? Thank you.
Can I do the Gaudem one, because I like Gaudem? So you're absolutely right. There is a lot of abuse that female politicians receive, and black women get it more than any other. Diane Abbott, who was there earlier, gets more than all of the other women combined. Women of faith get a lot too. And what we have to do is change our whole political system, change the narrative, change the language, change the way that we interact, but also ensure that try and ensure that the media take their responsibility as well to how they report. There's a lot that needs to be done. On the stage today, we've got lots of our candidates who are seeking to enter Parliament on the 12th of December, and we have to make sure that it's safe for people to enter, because otherwise it affects our democracy. If you scare people out of standing, then it interferes with our democracy, and we've got to stop that. And Labour is committed to stopping that. And we are so committed to ensure that we kick the current person out of number 10.
Thank you very much, Dawn. And I'd like to invite Afzal Khan now to answer the question about prevent.
Thank you very much. Well, I think Labour Party's position is very clear in this, that we want to make sure that we do have an independent review of prevent, because we want to make sure that prevent policy actually works. It's been there for many, many years, and it's important that we also take stock. We've been pushing the government as well, and if we are in power, we will make sure that there is independent review of the prevent strategy.
Thank you very much, Afzal, and thank you very much for those excellent questions. I'd now like to invite all of the candidates on stage in order to have a picture before Jeremy leaves with all of our excellent parliamentary candidates. So if we can please come forward, along with obviously Dawn and Afzal and Stephen Timms, Lord Dubs, and can we also have the future MPs from this side as well? Come on, everyone. And if we can have the choir singing, that would be absolutely magnificent.
I'm not a stranger to the dark. Hide away, they say, 'cause we don't want your broken part. I've learned to be ashamed of all my scars. Run away, they say, no one will love you as you are. I won't let them break me down to dust. I know that there's a place for us, for we are glorious. When the sharpest words wanna cut me down, I'm gonna send a flock, gonna drown them out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me, look out, 'cause here I come. And I'm marching on to the beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen. I make no apologies. This is me. Oh, 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 this is me.
Another round of bullets is my skin. Fire away, 'cause today I won't let the shame sink in. We're passing through